This is the Observations Podcast for Sunday, the 27th of October, according to my watch, 2024. Welcome back to the podcast. So a couple of things as far as administrivia goes. Michael is not here yet for some reason, so I'm hopeful that he'll show up here in a few minutes. However, we are planning on doing a live election night podcast starting at 6 o'clock Pacific time, 9 p.m. Eastern time on Tuesday the 6th or Tuesday the 5th of November, which is Election Day. So we will be looking at the election returns as we come in. We decided that since we would most likely be on the phone with each other anyway all night, that we might as well just do it live and broadcast a live election returns as they come in. So we'll be looking at Decision Desk HQ and various other places and just sort of following as the election returns come popping in from various places. I don't know that we're actually going to know anything, even if we stick around until midnight Eastern time or 9 p.m. Pacific, because we've already heard, for whatever reason, that it is simply not going to be possible to count all of the ballots in a couple of states. Georgia has said so. Pennsylvania has said so. Pennsylvania, in fact, is saying it may be 13 or 14 days, 2 weeks, before we actually get an election count and know who won in Pennsylvania. This is not 1835. I'm not sure why we have to wait 2 weeks to figure out who won an election. Oh, and by the way, we could do it quicker in 1835, so I'm not entirely sure what the problem is. If you tell me in 2024 that it's going to take you 2 weeks to count all of the ballots, then I am afraid, absent, of course, some absentee ballots or military ballots that are coming in, like from APO post boxes that may be postmarked properly but don't arrive, which should be a relatively small number of ballots overall. If you're telling me that you can't count those, okay, well, that's fine. They're still stuck in the mail. The U.S. Postal Service will get them to you, presumably at some point in time within 2 weeks after the election. But I should know who won, and I should know who won the election pretty quickly on election night. And by the way, this is some weird new thing. For those of us, I'm 60 years old at this point, so I can remember elections in the 70s and 80s and 90s, and we didn't have to wait for 2 weeks to figure out who won. We pretty much had it nailed on election night, often fairly quickly, such as in the case of 1998 when it was blindingly obvious before even Election Day started how that was going to end up. But whatever the election results are going to be, Michael and I are going to be on 6 o'clock Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern on Tuesday, November 5th, to do a live stream of the election returns as they come in. And we'll just comment on stuff as they happened. I really wish that back in 2016 we'd have done that, simply because of the absolute pleasure of watching that New York Times needle that showed the probability of winning, and it was way over on Hillary Clinton's side. And throughout the night, it started to go closer and closer and closer. And then I guess it was like, I don't know, here in California, it was like 8 or 9 o'clock when they finally said, okay, yeah, Donald Trump is going to win this election. So it'll be interesting to watch on next Tuesday night, to see how things go. Like I said, Michael is not here. I'm not sure why. He didn't contacted me. Oh, wait a second. I just got a text from him. Little late, be on in a couples. Okay, well, that's great. That'll give me time to do the administrivia and do the announcement. I suppose I should also say, because I very rarely do it, and indeed I have don't I have a little thing here that is supposed to show up? Well, no, I guess it's over here. I guess it's on the live side. I have a little, well, I thought I did. Yes, I do. I have this little thing. If you look down on the screen, I have a little like video that is supposed to run that shows, comment, like, and subscribe. You can see it. Oh, nope. You can see it right over there. That comment, like, subscribe thing. I don't have that whenever it's only me. I probably should drop it over there. That's something I'll worry about another time. However, like the video, hit the little like button. If you're not subscribed to the channel, subscribe, and leave a comment, even if your comment says you're a bunch of morons and we hate listening to you, because every comment you leave helps us out in the algorithm, whether it's good or bad. So like, comment, and subscribe to talk to us. All right, since Michael's not here, I'm not going to start off with what I was going to start off with. I'm going to start off with some horse race stuff, largely because that's easy to talk about just by myself. So let's do that, and I'm going to turn off for the moment down here at the bottom of the screen. I'm going to go ahead and turn off that, well, that's not the thing I wanted to turn off. I think I wanted to turn off the zoom window right there so that we could see the bottom of the screen properly. And this is Real Clear Politics once again, and it's the Real Clear Politics averages. And for the first time in the national average for Real Clear Politics, Donald Trump is ahead by 0.1 points once again. And so he hasn't been ahead for a long, long time. And he is now ahead again in the RCP average. For the last couple of months, it has been pretty bad for Donald Trump. Harris has been up 1 or 2 points, as much as 4 points in some of the polling, but for the very first time, that has reversed. And in fact, you can see the historical version of it. This is showing me 6 months. I think that's probably too much. Let's go to 30 days. So consistently, Harris has been 2 points ahead, consistently right up until about October 20th. And it started to flop. And the interesting thing is it's not been a huge gain for Trump, although he has gained slowly and fairly substantially since about October 8th. But the interesting thing is Harris was steady, a little up, a little down. And then somewhere around the 20th of October, she just started to drop and has now dropped below Donald Trump in the Real Clear Politics average. Now, this is just a polling average, so it's just sort of the average of all the polls that Real Clear Politics covers. It just takes all of those polls, the most recent polls, as you can see here if we look up at the polls. These are the polls that they're looking at. So they go all the way back to 10/11 in terms of when the actual polling was conducted. And so it's fairly recent. We're at least 17 days, 16 days old. But these numbers are narrowing, and it's finally put Trump ahead for the first time in a while. And, oh, by the way, I just saw Michael pop in. So let me pop open the Zoom window for Michael so that he is there. And it looks like no problem. It happens.
Bleed issue. The air here is really dry at this time of year, and it causes nosebleeds sometimes. So
you know what?
I don't want to come on with a tampon in my nose or something.
Yeah, I get those out here too, especially out of this nostril for some reason. I'm not even sure why, but yeah.
Yeah, that's weird to me too. It's like usually one nostril, but whatever.
Yeah,
it is what it is.
Yeah, but I've had it. I've actually gotten up at the first thing in the morning and sort of like rubbed my nose, and then just blood just starts pouring out. I have no idea why, and I always worry that I have some horrific health problem that's been undiagnosed. Although I think the chances of that, after having just spent a week in Scripps Memorial Hospital, are pretty low. I think they know.
Yeah, I think you're pretty good now.
I think they pretty much know all the things that might possibly be wrong with me. Anyway, Donald Trump, now slightly ahead, has finally crossed over and is up by 0.1 points. Again, this is a poll average, and they throw all of the polls in here. Ipsos, is that accurate with Harris up 4? Seriously? I don't know. Interestingly, ABC...
Well, some of those are like D+6 and D+5, so they're going to skew a little bit.
Well, interestingly, I saw a thing talked about this Harris +4 poll from ABC, and they were like, ABC was the most accurate poll in 2020. and in 2016. Yeah, they also weren't using Ipsos back then. They changed their polling provider and they went over to Ipsos. So it's not the same poll. It's not the same methodology. It's not the same people doing it. So that really seems like an outlier when you look at well, there's only one more, which is Morning Consult, which has Harris up that high. Everybody else has Harris either barely up, a tie, or Trump up.
Yeah, that New York Times Siena poll, it's a national poll, which is,
well, so are these,
basically worthless, but it had Trump up by like 2 or something.
Well, I have a question. We'll get to it a little bit later, but we see this, and like you said, this is a national poll, and this is RCP's average of national polls. Does it tell us much? Probably not, except in sort of big picture terms, where in 2020, at this point, Biden was up 7.4 points in the polls. At this point in 2016, Clinton was up 5.6. And now we're getting right up next to the election. So we're getting really close to having these polls start to, I don't know, tighten up, but I think the polls accurize as you get closer to the election. No matter, even if you are rooting for a side, you don't want to make yourself look like a fool when the election occurs. So in that last week prior to the election,
yeah. So they try to get more accurate as it gets closer to election day.
Yeah, but beyond that, whenever you look at these results, and this is of course the betting average, doesn't mean anything. American citizens can't even participate in this. However,
legally,
legally. But if you look at the last, well, let's go with 3 months, how Harris was up, and it's been mainly Harris up. But once again, you just start to see this break apart where Trump is now at 60.9, Harris is down at 37.8. Then whenever you look at the Real Clear Politics electoral map, now they haven't changed this map in a long time. It's still been 215 at 219 with all of these states as toss-ups, which, okay, fine. But what has changed, and has changed quite a bit, is there are no toss-up states, which is now based on and again, these are all based on polling averages from state polls. So again, we're still just averaging polls. Our Real Clear Politics isn't doing any magic here to make any of this happen. They're just doing.
It's a good way to kind of get a grip on what's going on with the polling.
Yes, at least it tells you where the polling is. But they're looking at Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Georgia, all going for Trump. If that's what election night looks like, then this thing is going to be over early.
Over. Yeah. Well, it's interesting. So I like to pay attention to where the money's going, where the ad buys are going. So earlier today, I was watching hockey game out of Philadelphia. And so it's a Philadelphia feed, right? And every commercial was about the election. Every commercial just getting slammed in the face. And then I went to watch the football game, the Commanders game, and there were a bunch of Kamala ads. I was a little surprised that they're spending money here in the DC area. Some of it is aimed at Maryland, for sure, but a bunch of it was also aimed at Virginia. And that's interesting that I know the polls have been tightening up here. I really don't expect Trump to pull out a win in Virginia, but I think it's going to be a lot closer than people think. And if it's going to be close in Virginia, I think Pennsylvania is within Trump territory, as is Michigan and Wisconsin.
Yeah, which both are showing, at least in Real Clear Politics' state polling averages, both are showing as being Trump states.
Yeah.
I mean, the interesting thing was that as little as a couple of years ago, we would have considered Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, anytime prior to 2016, we would have considered them part of the blue wall.
Exactly.
Of course,
Yeah.
we'd have also considered Virginia, a Republican state as well.
And it was, up until about 2008, 2012.
But then again, we would have also considered New Hampshire a reliably Republican state back at that time as well.
Or at least half of it.
Yeah. So sure, things have changed, but I wonder how much this Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin projection, and of course, this is a guess based on polling averages. Let's not pretend this is the way it's really going to turn out. But I'm wondering how much of this is the fact that so many working class people are attracted to Trump now in a way that they just aren't attracted to the Democratic Party anymore.
I think that's basically it. And that's who they went after in 2016. And I remember we were watching the election returns when PA, and then Ohio, and then I think it was Michigan. We were like, okay, it's over. That was it. That they were done. Once they got through those Rust Belt states, we knew it was over, that Hillary had lost. And it seems to be a similar path to victory this time around as well. And you're right that it is those working class people, manufacturing, automotive, these are the coal miners, farmers. These are the people who feel disaffected, don't necessarily show up a whole lot for, every election, certainly not presidential elections. And they're coming out in spades for Trump, apparently. I mean, we don't know, but there's also been some of this is also based, some of these predictions are based on the votes that are already banked. So seeing a huge rise in Republicans voting early, in person early, by mail, whatever. But they know by the registrations who's sending in these votes. And Republicans have had a pretty big lead in Pennsylvania, of all places. They also have a registration lead in for new voters.
Yeah, for the first time in years.
In a really long time. I think since like Spectre. I mean, it's been like 20 years. So yeah, it's the signs and trends point towards a GOP victory. Doesn't mean that that's what'll happen, but those are the trends. Those are the signs.
Two things occur to me. Number one, where are all these blue collar workers in 2020? And number two, are we beginning to see a preference cascade towards Donald Trump?
Yeah, I think we are, especially after the week that Harris and Walz had, where they just sound like idiots. I mean, and they're so contradictory. They're not selling anything but lies. And it's all lies about the GOP and Trump. Nobody has any clue what their actual policies are.
Yeah, the interesting thing was after the CNN thing with Anderson Cooper, even the CNN panel were basically saying, without actually coming out and saying it, this is an empty suit. She doesn't have a message, and I don't know what her explanation is for why I should vote for her. She can't articulate it.
Yeah, turn the page. Well, what are you turning the page from? Anderson Cooper asked her that.
Yeah,
like, what are you actually turning the page from?
Yeah, you're the vice president.
Right. You're actually in power right now. So what? And like, we're talking about the new generation of leadership.
Yeah.
What the hell does that mean? You haven't even said anything you would have done differently than Joe Biden.
To his credit, he said to her, look, you keep saying it's time for change, turn the page. You've been vice president for 3.5 years. And Donald Trump has been running for president for, yeah, but you have the job.
It's already in your hands.
Yeah, she could not address that. The answer, Donald Trump has been running for president that's like asking your kids, where are your shoes? And the kid responding, the Fed.
My brother doesn't have his.
The Fed. No, no, that would even be related. The response from your kid of, where are your shoes? The Fed may increase interest rates. It's not only not an answer to the question.
It's a complete non sequitur.
It's a complete non sequitur. It has nothing to do with what we're talking about. And even the CNN panel was just like, oh yeah, she's not able to explain why it is she wants our vote. Usually people can, if you ask people and give them a chance, hey, why should I pick you? No matter what it is, whether it's your kickball team or whatever, people can generally come up with some excuse as to why.
Every job interview you've ever been to, you get asked this question in some form or another, right? And she's been asked several times. She's been given multiple opportunities to answer this question, and she can't.
Look, she's 3 months into a presidential campaign, and she can't answer the basic question of, why should I vote for you?
It took her a month and a half, almost 2 months, to even put anything to populate her policy page on her website.
And while I hate to give predictions, about things like this, because let's face it, our record in predicting in the last week of a presidential campaign what was going to happen, they're not great. But boy, it sure feels like there is a preference cascade that's shifting to Trump at this point.
You can definitely feel a swing. I mean, I live in very blue Northern Virginia, and one of the bluest of this blue area, I see Trump signs out in yards. Like, people are willing to actually put Trump signs out in their yards. That signifies to me that there's definitely a shift going on.
I think it would be hilarious if Trump won Virginia.
It'd be awesome. I don't think it's going to happen, but the fact that he's forcing them to spend money here is great.
I wouldn't have thought Glenn Youngkin would have gotten elected either, but here we are.
I knew Glenn Youngkin would get. He ran at exactly the right time. He's got exactly the right temperament. He's really not. He's pretty moderate Republican. I wouldn't call him a squish necessarily. He's right on the correct issues. And we were going through all the school stuff at the time. The kid that raped 2 girls at 2 different schools, and they just kept moving around, didn't report it, didn't tell the parents. Like, oh yeah,
that was a pretty big
crazy
scandal.
Stuff. And that helped push Youngkin into the lead. And you got to remember too that in Virginia you only get 1 term, so once you're in, that's it.
That's it. You've had your shot. Well, my other question, and I think I may partially know the answer, but my other question is, where were these blue collar workers in 2020? And I think one of the things that happened, I don't know that they abandoned Trump, although I think there was a fair amount of Trump fatigue in 2020. But I think especially in Michigan and Wisconsin and Pennsylvania too, I think you can make the argument that the changes that they made to the election due to COVID and the huge increase in things like having just drop boxes for ballots and stuff like that, and the large increase in the number of people who actually voted in 2020 vice 2016, because they made the election easier, although I think we could probably argue they also made it less secure in terms of knowing who was voting. He didn't win Michigan or Wisconsin by a lot. I mean, we were down to...
It was like 11,000 votes, I think, in each.
Yeah. So if you're going to add another 300, 400,000 votes just by having drop boxes everywhere and everybody gets to, absentee vote, then I think you swamp that blue collar support for Trump automatically, even if they remain. Now, I don't know if they remained because like I said, I think there was a fair amount of Trump fatigue back then. But even if they did remain, they probably were swamped by just all of the extra voters that year.
Well, I think you're right about the Trump fatigue. That was definitely going. People were just tired. Not even so much Trump, but the anti-Trump noise and rhetoric and actions.
Yeah, it was just
people
constant.
Were just tired of it.
Yeah, it was just constant drama. It just never stopped.
It was also, I think, partially the way that Trump handled COVID and just turned everything over to Fauci and Birx. People didn't like that, and I agree with them. I didn't like it either. And I think another part of it was that the anti-Trump vote was motivating for a lot of people. Joe Biden was enough of a known entity to bring out some people who were just like anybody but Trump.
Well, that was Joe Biden's
Harris
whole pitch.
does not have that pool.
That was Joe Biden's whole pitch, right? Return to normalcy.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Right. I mean, it was basically Warren G. Harding's pitch in 1920 after World War I, a return to normalcy.
Mm-hmm.
And it worked for him, and apparently it worked for Joe Biden as well. Unfortunately, I think people learned that Joe Biden, this avuncular figure who was rather inoffensive, I think they learned the hard way that Joe was not well suited for the office of the presidency, which any of us who had watched him for the last 40 years could have easily told you.
And he's not actually all that avuncular. He's actually very offensive. He's one of the nastiest people to ever run for office. He is just an absolute jerk. I mean, a really, really bad person. The one thing that always flashes in my mind is that the guy who hit his wife and daughter, and actually at least one of the sons was in the car as well. But when his wife and daughter died in the 70s, he blamed the driver. Wasn't the driver's fault, actually. It was actually his wife's fault. And proclaimed that he was a drunk driver, hounded this guy. The guy ended up committing suicide. He's just a nasty, self-centered, self-preservationist, obviously corrupt. He's not bright. He has never been bright.
Oh no,
he's always been a dumbass.
They've called him Slow Joe Biden for years, but he had this image of Amtrak Joe. He's just a regular guy who takes the Amtrak back to Delaware on the weekend.
I played soccer with his sons in high school, and never saw him at one game, not one.
Yeah, that's not surprising, but especially when you have the complicity of a willing press, if you're a Democrat, you can come up with a much more avuncular image than you deserve. But now that we've had 4 years of that, and of course now we realize that he's not capable of fulfilling the office for the next 4 years, indeed may not even be currently capable of performing those duties, he gives it off to Kamala Harris. And look, the reason he picked Kamala Harris was job security.
Yeah. Kind of like how Obama picked him.
Well, look, ultimately, he picked Kamala Harris, and I can make that argument about Obama too. He picked Kamala Harris because she had failed on the national stage. And the general assessment of her was that she was an incompetent who couldn't run a campaign and who couldn't keep her mouth shut and who was always word salad. And look, she didn't even make it to Iowa, for goodness sake, in the Democratic primary.
She's never received one vote.
Yeah, she was
in a primary.
She was a safe choice because everybody knew she was an empty suit and nobody would want to get rid of Joe if it meant putting her in the office. Which, by the way,
second-rate understudy who wouldn't upstage him.
Which, by the way, they still haven't done, one notices.
Yeah, weird that.
But they made her the candidate, and they did everything that they could. And look, for a while it worked. They did a full court press about how impressive and all this stuff that she was. And it worked right up until the point that she started going out and talking, and people started paying attention to the presidential campaign.
Yeah, the biggest problem is she had to open her mouth.
And once she went for a full month without doing anything other than tightly scripted events. And the second that she ultimately was forced to go out after what I presume was a month of prep, pretty much everything she has done has been a disaster. And the more people see her, the less they like her. And the more people pay attention as the election gets close, the less they like her.
She couldn't handle The View. She couldn't handle Colbert. She couldn't handle CNN. She couldn't handle ABC. Obviously, she couldn't handle Fox News, but good Lord, she drew the most polite person on Fox News that there is, who exists there. And she couldn't handle any of it. Oh, she did great in the debate. Well, did she really? I mean, she was getting a lot of help there, and she didn't say anything there either, and just looked nasty and condescending and arrogant the entire time.
Well, also, the wrong Trump showed up for that debate.
Yeah, that's true.
Angry Trump showed up for that debate, not funny Trump. And so every time Trump shows up for something, I wonder who's going to show up. As I did whenever he appeared on the Joe Rogan podcast on Friday.
Yeah, have you watched any of it?
Yes, I have. And happy Trump.
And he's so Trump. Like, he rambles and kind of goes off in weird directions and then kind of comes back and whatever. But he's able to actually have a real conversation. And Rogan's great because he is really good at directing his visitors, in a way that will get to answers he's curious about, and he knows his listeners are curious about. And he did that with Trump really well. I only watched about maybe an hour of it, but it was I thought it was pretty good.
By the way, 30 million views since Friday.
That's huge.
30 million views in 2 days. Guess who refused to go on Joe Rogan?
Right. Well, we predicted that. That was a pretty easy one.
Yeah. Can you imagine Kamala Harris spending 3 hours sitting by Joe Rogan?
She couldn't do 20 minutes.
Yeah, she couldn't do 20 minutes with Bet Bear. Now, look, Joe Rogan, and look, he handled Trump with kid gloves as well. Joe Rogan is not a guy who is there to attack you.
No,
which I think
he'll give you a chance to say whatever the hell you want.
Yeah, I think that makes him a much more watchable podcast. Joe comes in, he's way low key. He asks you questions. If you say something that he finds funny, he has a very non-threatening way of challenging you. Now, there were some things.
And he's got his team with the backups. Hey, can we bring that up? Because I just want to know if this is what we're talking about. And he's really good about that. His team is really good. His guests are really good. I mean, he gets a lot out of people.
He did not push back on some things against Trump that I think he should have. And I think he probably would with Kamala Harris. And I just don't, her problem is that she has spent her entire life in a political system that doesn't push back against anything that she says.
Absolutely. That's a problem with a lot of liberals, and professors talk about this, even liberal professors, that, you don't get challenged. And so you don't know how to respond. You haven't ingrained any kind of true thought about this. You're just repeating nonsense phrases. And
everything she says is a nonsense phrase. And she says it like
even David Axelrod of all people and Van Jones were calling her, or talking about how she was, spitting out word salad.
It's like her. Let's talk about the significance of the passage of time. What does that mean? I mean, it's
well. Let me explain it to you, Dale. There's time, and it passes, and that's significant. So when I talk about the significance of the passage of time, we're really talking about how time passes and why that's significant.
That's a lot of words that either says nothing or says something so blindingly obvious as to be useless as an observation.
Well, and then you've got
I mean, you might as well just
JD
say
Vance on the other hand.
You might as well just say time exists. Okay,
Right.
thanks.
And then you got JD Vance on the other hand, who just like handles everybody with a plum. And he just comes across as deeply prescient, knowledgeable, and kind. In my eyes, not to everybody. My wife thinks he's creepy for some reason. I have no idea why. It's just he is the absolute antithesis of someone like Kamala Harris. Certainly Tim Walz, who's by his own definition a knucklehead.
See, Tim Walz is a guy that I find creepy.
He's just weird.
And I don't know why, but there's something that I see Tim Walz and something about him hits me as creepy.
He just seems deeply dishonest.
Yeah,
well, he is deeply dishonest.
Yeah, he is. I mean, I just assume that naturally because he's a politician. It's just
right. Yeah.
Something That's about true. There's something about the guy that rubs me the wrong way. I don't know. Unlike your wife, I don't know that I find JD Vance creepy. I have problems with some of JD Vance's intellectual arguments that he puts forward. So there's a lot that I disagree with JD Vance about. As a politician, however, and his ability to go head to head with the news media, it's hard to find anything to fault there.
Yeah. But at the same time, we also thought that about Chris Christie back when he first got started as governor of New Jersey. So, that's not necessarily the sine qua non of, being a good leader or politician.
Yeah, that's true. But Chris Christie, see, the thing is, I don't know how well J.D. Vance would ever do if he runs for president. Obviously, if Donald Trump gets elected and he becomes the vice president, he automatically becomes...
He's going to be first in line, yeah.
The heir apparent. But, when you talk about Chris Christie, when you're running for vice president, it's okay to be an attack dog.
Right.
When you're running for the top job, I think people want to see a little less attack dog in you. You always want to have your Spiro Agnew around, but if both Spiro Agnew and Richard Nixon are the attack dogs, it's probably not going to turn out well over the long term.
And it's sort of flipped with this pairing, right? Like Trump's the attack dog, and JD is out there, the one kind of being conciliatory. He was getting in his debate with Walz, he was getting Walz to agree with him. I mean, it was actually kind of amazing, which is odd because it's usually like you said, the other way around. Yeah, your vice president is the attack dog.
You don't need two bad cops. So in this particular case, JD Vance is the good cop. It's
Wait, you were the good cop? I thought
it's gone very strange. But Kamala Harris's problem, since she can't articulate why she should be president other than, ripping off Jack Kennedy.
Or why time is significant, or why Venn diagrams exist.
Yeah, other than ripping off Jack Kennedy, saying it's time to pass the torch to a new generation of Americans.
God.
So what do you fall back on? Well, you fall back on the old tried and true argument that's been there for years and years and years. So here's Jeb Bush with baby Hitler. Here's Hitler and George H.W. Bush.
H.W.
And you obscure it, so I'm going to cut you out of the picture for just a second here. But there's Ronald Reagan with his Hitler mustache. And here is George W. Bush with the Hitler comparison. And then, of course, you can't forget John McCain and the amazing parallels between John McCain and Adolf Hitler. And of course,
we can go all the way back to George McGovern.
And of course, Mitt Romney.
Yeah, that famous Hitlerite Mormon.
So with all of that in mind, is it any wonder that we're now hearing, well, in 1939, the Nazis had a big rally in Madison Square Garden. You know who else is having another big rally in Madison Square Garden? Donald Trump.
Hillary Clinton? Oh, no, that was 2001. Sorry.
No, Donald Trump. See, Donald Trump is having a Madison Square Garden rally just like Hitler did in 1939.
I bet he drinks water just like Hitler, too.
And so, of course, they are projecting on the side of Madison Square Garden. Trump praised Hitler. And, of course, all we're talking about on the Harris campaign is how much Trump loves Hitler. And, of course, not helped this week by former Marine Corps General and White House Chief of Staff John Kelly coming out this week and telling us that Donald Trump said, "I wish I had generals like Hitler did."
Did anybody actually believe that, who wasn't already in the camp that Trump is Hitler?
Okay, well, I have a nuanced view on this. So, number one, you actually don't want to have generals like Adolf Hitler has, because you don't want to end up 75 feet below the surface of the Capitol, shooting yourself in the head in a bunker because your army has failed you and you are now about to be overrun by the communists. So you actually don't want generals like Hitler. Their loyalty to Hitler and the toadies that he surrounded with himself, Field Marshal Keitel, Colonel General Jodl, and all of the rest of that crew. They were toadies. And by the way, we hung them good and hard after the end of the war for, being a little too loyal to Adolf Hitler, and they deserved it.
And there were a few of them that tried to overthrow Hitler at one point.
The November 1944 plot, which he hung them all. Including, who was it that he hung right at the very end? He had him strung up on a meat hook with piano wire in the Fuhrer bunker for participation in the November 1944 plot. It's not really important that we go into the Goethe-Dämmerung of the last days of Nazi Germany. But the point is, if you have generals like Hitler, you're going to end up like Hitler. So it's not a great wish. However, do I believe that Trump actually said it? I certainly think it's plausible, and I'll tell you why. I mean, you said, does anybody believe this? Yeah, I think I might. And the reason why I might is that Donald Trump has an almost unerring sense of knowing what to say to somebody to get under their skin and to enrage them. Now, I don't know if he does this to gauge their loyalty to him or whether he does this to just be insulting to them because he feels like they're betraying.
Draw them out or something. Yeah.
I don't know why, but whenever
he is a troll. He's a master troll.
He's a troll. That's the problem. He's a troll. And because he is a troll, you'd be in jail. I can see him saying that to General Kelly. And just to piss Kelly off. Who knows at what point this was said and how close he was to wanting to.
Well, it's just funny that Kelly never said anything about it until.
Well, yeah. I mean, we're now the most.
And why didn't he quit?
Yeah, the most recently it could have happened was 4 years ago, and so when it comes to Kelly's credibility, you also have to weigh that. Sure, there's the fact that Trump is a troll, and he says outrageous things to try to get a rise out of people, or to anger them because they've displeased him in some way and he just wants to dig at them. So you have that. But on the other hand, you have General Kelly, who did not say anything 4 years ago, hasn't said anything for the last 4 years, and then waits until he has a book coming out a week before the election to come out and said, oh yeah, Trump also said he wanted Hitler's generals.
Yeah, the convenience factor is a bit off in my discretion.
But here's the thing, it doesn't matter. Because I think to a large extent, I mean, we are now, since 2015, it's the end of 2024, we are more than 9 years into the Trump experience.
Right. Yeah, everything's baked into the cake at this point.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't know that this is who the guy is, and by the way, I'm not saying that Trump said it. I don't know. I'm just saying it's certainly plausible that he could have said it, because it does sound like the kind of thing that he might want to say if it was to get under your skin. But again, it's Trump. And
yeah, it doesn't mean he means it. It means that he's just being an asshole for some reason.
Yeah, he is trolling you. And so I have to try to, and ultimately I come to, I don't know who to believe. I don't know who to believe, and you know what? I don't care. Because I know enough about Trump at this point that I do not believe that Donald Trump said, you know what? I really want to reconfigure the Department of Defense to have a general staff exactly like the Germans created in World War I and World War II. And I want the same German staff system. And I want all American generals to be forced to swear a personal oath of loyalty to me rather than to the Constitution.
That's actually kind of believable coming from Trump. the personal loyalty thing, that doesn't seem that far off. But the fact that they don't even make up that story, right? And they have to go to, well, he loved Hitler's generals. It's like, you could have just backed up a little bit, thought about this and said, well, he wanted like personal loyalty oaths. People would believe that. I would believe that. And I would find it wrong. But that at least sounds somewhat in the realm of Trump.
Yeah, I just
don't. That he loved Hitler. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, that's the thing. You've got the possibility, based on what he said, of coming up with two stories, one of which is eminently plausible. Now, I don't think Trump would actually want to say we have to change the oath of office to military officers to have a personal oath to the president rather than to the Constitution, which, by the way, Congress will never allow to happen.
Right.
So it's just not going to happen. So
unless Kamala gets elected.
But the thing is, it's believable to say Trump wants to have generals who are personally loyal to him. At least that is a sort of a non-specific thing that you would believe because Trump does value personal loyalty.
And that's something that could be exploited politically,
but
even if it's not true.
But you know what would make that story even better? If we said he loved Hitler.
Right.
No, that doesn't make the story better. Now it makes it sound like some sort of weird power fantasy. that you have.
Right.
You've already got a perfectly plausible story that might be damaging to Trump if you frame it in a less tendentious way. But the Democrats can't do that. Let's make this sound as bad as possible to hurt him as much as possible. The trouble is, they're not dealing with a guy who, has been married to the same woman for the last 57 years and who has a public record of incomparable decency, and that if you tell something like this, it just exposes him as the monster he is. This is Donald Trump. We all know he's an asshole. We all know he's an egocentric guy. He's a borderline narcissist. It's baked into the cake, and that is something I just don't think the Democrats get. Donald Trump's personality flaws are well known.
Right.
And to the extent that Kamala Harris is losing to him, what it should be telling the Democrats is that the electorate has decided that his personal
peccadillos
and his personal sense of humor and his personal narcissism just aren't disqualifying, because as long as he's competent, we don't give a shit.
He has the advantage too of having served as president for 4 years.
Yeah,
and he's got a track record.
Yeah, that also makes the argument harder to credit.
Sell.
Because, okay, sure, we can talk all we want about January 6th, and Donald Trump probably should have been way more proactive on January 6th, whatever. We're not going to go back and change the past. But the fact is, he got on the airplane and he flew out of Washington, D.C. I mean, at the end of the day.
On the day he was supposed to.
At the end of the day, the inauguration occurred. Sure, he was enough of an asshole that he determined he wasn't going to show up and participate, which, okay, fine. But the fact is, he left on January 20th. Now,
right.
And by the way, even if, as we've talked about before, even if everything on January 6th that everybody said that they wanted to happen would happen, and that Mike Pence would have said, I refuse to certify these, blah, 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 it wouldn't have made a damn bit of difference, because Congress...
It would have delayed the actual vote by a week, maybe.
Yeah,
and
maybe.
On January 20th, Biden would have still been sworn in.
Yeah, it would have changed nothing. So everybody knows who Donald Trump is. So all of these stories can also be framed as not that Donald Trump loves Adolf Hitler, but that Donald Trump thought that John Kelly was an asshole and he wanted to get in a dig at him. I mean, I could certainly frame it that way, and based on how Trump deals with other people, that's more believable to me than Donald Trump wants to be Adolf Hitler and has decided at 78 years old that if he wins this election, he'll be president for life.
I can't imagine that he would want to. I really have always felt, whatever disdain I might have for him personally, I have always felt that he truly thought he needed to do this because he was worried about the direction of the country. And frankly, he was right. I mean, I hate to say that, but he was right. We needed an outsider. And that's what causes almost all this turmoil, is that he's an outsider to the political class, right? He's not part of their cabal, either Democrat or Republican. He is outside the political class. He comes in, does good things. I mean, for fuck's sake, we had great unemployment numbers. We were bringing back manufacturing. The Abraham Accords, remain in Mexico. I mean, there were a lot of good things going on. There were some shitty things going on as well. The fucking budget that he signs, and the amount of spending was ridiculous. But he did build back up the military. That was good. There were a lot of good things that were happening.
Abraham
People
Accords.
could feel it in their pocketbooks. People could see it on the television. I mean, there were good things happening. And no new wars. We getting involved in anything else new.
And then COVID came.
We retaliated when necessary, but we didn't, put troops on the ground.
And then COVID came and he threw it all away. All he had to do was tell Fauci, your job is to provide advice. We are not going to run the economy. But look, you know what? Everybody made that mistake. Well, the Swedes didn't, obviously. But outside of the Swedes, it's this lack of tolerance for risk that has grown up in Western countries.
It's the feminization of culture. We
simply can't handle any risk. So it's better if we shut down the entire economy for weeks on end and then just print another $7 trillion just to hand out to people so that they don't lose their jobs and they don't lose their houses, than it would be to risk getting COVID. And look, apparently Trump, as old as he is every bit as risk averse as the rest of our society has become.
He is a famous germaphobe. So,
Yeah, well, it could be that. I mean, I would have told Fauci, no, we are not shutting down the economy. We can't. People have to work. People have to live. There's some amount of risk. If you want to tell people that they got to wear masks, and for companies who can, to have people work from home, have all of your people work from home to the extent that that's possible. But we can't just deprive millions of Americans of their livelihood based on the fact that we have a...
Well, especially when 70% of our economy is made up of small businesses, that are family owned or, privately owned, where the main breadwinner is working hard at that company.
Yeah, I think... I don't know. I think the 2020 election would have gone a lot differently if he had not just turned everything over. Basically, he just did everything that Fauci said to do. And
yeah,
almost everything Fauci said to do was wrong. And the people...
I would go further. I would say everything he said to do was wrong.
And by the way, the people who got it right were Ron DeSantis in Florida, Brian Kemp in Georgia.
Who got yelled at by Trump for opening up early.
Yeah. I mean, look, if you want to do the 2 weeks to slow the spread, I think that's a dumb idea. And I don't think it's going to work.
But it's only 2 weeks.
But it's 2 weeks. We lived through that. We shut down airlines for a month after 9/11.
Yep.
So sure, we can recover from 2 weeks of everything being shut down. It won't be comfortable. It won't be great. But we're not going to endanger people's ability to keep their houses and to keep food on the table, ultimately. And to the extent that we do, what the hell? We can just send out checks. Not $7 trillion worth, but we could, it would cost us something. But
it was also the arbitrariness of the, like, who could work and who couldn't, who were essential workers and who weren't. So grocery store workers could put their lives on the line, as could strippers, and certain bars and restaurants,
but not some guy who just has a plumbing truck who's trying to build a plumbing company.
And you couldn't go to church. Oh no, that was bad. You can't go, paddleboarding in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, by yourself because, we need to hunt you down and drag you to jail for that.
That was a California thing more than a
either way
thing, but...
it was the zeitgeist of the shutdown crowd who are all about no. I mean, and some of them are still masking up. Some of these idiots are still masking up. I still see these morons in their car by themselves with a mask on, walking around outside with a mask on. Like, what the fuck is wrong with you?
Yeah, I just recently had the same experience, being in a room with about 20, 25 people, and there was one person who was wearing an N95 mask for the whole thing.
Like, what?
Yeah, which, look, you do what you want to do. That's fine.
Yeah, I don't give a shit. I think you're stupid, and you're basically wearing the sign that says I'm stupid.
I don't even think it's that you're stupid. I think it is. I think it is just a marker that you have a very low tolerance for risk, and that you are so. You view the world.
You're manipulable.
You view the world with such fear that I can manipulate you through that fear. And, I think it's sad, but I don't hate you. I don't dislike you. I don't even think that you're stupid. I just think that you have more fear than you should have. But, we saw people, I can remember, I don't know why we're relitigating a 4-year-old issue, but I just remember seeing people driving around in their cars by themselves with all the windows up. So I know they're running air conditioning, and they're wearing a freaking N95 mask as they drive down the road all alone by themselves. And okay, sure. Please wear your magical avatar. If it makes you feel better, wear your magical avatar. It's
what do we call it back? Oh, a talisman. Yeah, we call it the talisman.
It's your talisman. Sure. You feel better wearing your talisman. You go ahead and wear it. It's no different than wearing your, I guess.
Yeah, I've got a cross on.
Yeah,
right?
I guess in some sense it's
my
no
St.
different.
Christopher's medal so that I can.
Yeah, exactly. You got your cross, you got your St. Christopher's medal, you got we just don't call them magical talismans because they're more socially acceptable in our society. But in any event, we are coming up to a week onto this thing, and as far as I can tell, and again, I hate to predict, it looks like this thing is Trump's to lose.
I agree. That doesn't mean he can't lose it. I mean, and obviously there's going to be cheating.
Yeah, it's got to be big enough to be beyond the margin of fraud.
It's going to have to be. And I think the groundswell right now is all in Trump's favor.
Yeah, I've been looking at this. First of all, the GOP has done something for the first time that they've never done before. And in fact, Trump, and there was I wanted to show you this, and I got to go to X to do it. And I don't think I had it keyed up. But one of the things that I noticed at that Trump rally in Madison Square Garden. So let me do a quick.
I haven't even seen that yet.
Yeah, let me do a quick search for Trump Madison
MSG
Square. Oh no, we're going to write out the whole thing because, where is that picture? You can't really see it here. Maybe if I expand it, you can barely see it. That banner right there says vote early.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So since about, I would say May, June, there's been a big push from the GOP to get people to vote early.
Yes. And the GOP has never done that before.
And so we talked about, when we were talking about the polls, and I brought that up, that's made a big difference. And that's one of the reasons the Democrats are so scared, because they know their people don't show up as often on election day. And you're still going to have a lot of Republicans voting on election day.
Yeah,
and independent.
This is a better one. It says it on all four sides, vote early.
That's a big crowd. I mean, Madison Square Garden, in just the seats, if that was a hockey game, would hold about 18,000.
Yeah, they're saying that the way they've got it set up now, he's got about 50,000 people there.
It's probably that seems high. Maybe 30. But it's a lot of people, and it's packed, and it's sold out apparently in like an hour or something.
Yeah, people were starting to wait up 12 hours prior. But
because they were there's all those Nazis that live in New York City.
Yeah, exactly. New York City, a well-known hotbed of fascism. The thing that I've been watching and I've been fascinated by is watching these early vote returns come in Pennsylvania and Florida and Georgia, and just looking at the increase in the number of Republican votes that are coming in that just shadow any prior year that you can think of, because it's always been, Democrats vote early, Republicans show up on the day.
Right.
And so we were in a situation where the Republicans were always depending on the election day turnout to throw them over the top. I've always thought that was look, I don't like the early voting thing, and I hate it. Universal mail-in voting and all of that. I just don't think they're very secure methods. I think that the election should be maybe not one day, but I mean, I wouldn't mind if you
make it a Sunday, Monday, Tuesday kind of thing, or Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday.
Yeah, give you a whole weekend all the way out to Tuesday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. Have the polls open for 4 days. They close at 8 p.m. on Tuesday, and that's it. I would have no problem with that. Obviously, I'd want you to be able to show your ID when you went to vote so that we could ensure that you were you. But that seems fine to me. Some states start voting a month early. I mean, for all you know, your guy could go down in a fiery plane crash between the time you voted a month early and the time election day came.
Virginia's 2 months early.
Yeah, I think prudentially it's just a stupid idea because you have no idea what's going to happen in 2 months.
That's right.
However, having said that,
And you miss all the October surprises.
yeah, having said that, if you are going to have early voting and you are going to have all of this other stuff going on,
Yeah,
then
bank the votes.
it is gobsmackingly stupid to do what they, and by the way, they did this in 2020. Now, don't vote early. Show up on election day. Well, you know what? You don't know how many people will be able to show up on election day. Maybe they get hit by a bus that Saturday. You don't know.
Maybe it rains. Maybe their car breaks down. Maybe they can't get there on the bus. Maybe they have a medical emergency. Who knows? I mean, there could be a ton of stuff that could happen.
If you have a system that allows you to bank votes, bank the votes.
Yeah.
And get them in whenever the system says, as soon as the system says you can start voting, start getting your votes in. Don't depend on election day. Sure, the majority of people will probably still show up on election day, except maybe in a state like California where they don't really want you to show up and vote on election day. They want you to vote by mail. But this is the first time.
Interesting point,
this is the first time that the Republicans, and by the way, led by somebody who is not even officially part of the Republican Party, Scott Presler, who has been going out and getting people registered.
The transgender GOP wonder.
It is a day and night difference between the way the GOP is approaching this election in 2024 and the way that they've approached it every year prior to that. If the Democrats are going to be out banking votes, then you need to be out banking votes.
Yeah, the GOTV for the GOP has been impressive this time around. Again, we don't know what the result's going to be, but the ground game got much better, much more involved, and early. And I think that's the big thing, is that it got started very early. It got started this summer, early in the summer. And that's a good thing. That's a smart thing. It makes it easier it makes it easier on campaigns for one reason, because they don't have to spend as much money on get out the vote efforts, because they know when people have gone and banked their votes, so they don't have to then spend money on mailers and flyers and phone calls and whatever else, so they can use that money more effectively for ads and whatever else.
Well, not only that, whatever your GOTV effort is going to be on election day, if you know that you have all of these people who have already voted, you can be way more targeted in terms of getting people
very
rides
selective.
to the poll,
that's right. Yeah,
getting people there, getting their votes in on election day, because your effort doesn't have to be as massive on election day, and the same amount of money takes you a lot farther on your get out the vote efforts if people are banking.
Absolutely.
And
that is very, very true.
And one of the other things that really require you to get those votes banked early is that, like the stuff that Scott Presler has been doing in Pennsylvania, where in some counties like Luzerne County, there is actually now a Republican lead in registrations in that county because of the number of registrations that he's picked up.
And it is a red county, but it's a county of low propensity voters.
That's right. And so if you're going to get these low propensity voters registered, you've got to stay on top of them and get those votes in. And you can't just say, well, I've registered you. See you on election day. No.
Right.
You have got to say, okay, we've got you registered. Would you like to vote now? I mean, we're all here. Right. Why can't we just, why can't we?
Yeah. Can we do it?
Can we do it?
When do you want to do it?
Because
Can I schedule you for a day to go there?
Exactly. Because you need to get those votes banked, because you're already grabbing people who haven't voted in the last 4 elections. So we already know that they're not inclined to show up on election day.
Right.
So registration is pointless if you're not going to get those votes banked. And so,
see, now that's what brings up to mind in a place like California or New York or Illinois, New Mexico. Even if Trump isn't going to win these states, I'm curious as to whether or not more people will vote who would vote GOP, or at least anti-Harris, um, just because they want to, it's easier for them. They want to show up and have their voice heard. I mean, you and I have talked about it a bunch. I mean, for a Republican to show up and vote in California is almost useless. It's just so overwhelmingly Democrat. And the same is true for at least the New York City and environs. But I'm wondering if more and more people are going to say, you know what, screw it, I'm going to vote anyway.
I've come around to, because I have had a tendency out here in California to vote Libertarian a lot, because I'm not a registered Republican.
Neither am I.
So I have always found it safe to just say, well, it doesn't matter. I already know that even if I like the Republican,
what California's going to do, right?
I already know what they're going to do. He's not going to win out here, so I don't necessarily have to vote for him. So I can vote for the Libertarian.
And then you get to actually vote for your real preference,
right? However, this time around, especially since 2000, because we have had this spate of elections from 2000 on, at least 3 times, where the winner of the Electoral College didn't win the popular vote. And that has always been used as an argument against the legitimacy of the Electoral College and for the anti-democratic nature of my system, an argument that I don't buy, by the way, but it's an argument that's being made. And so I would think, and my thinking on this has been that you almost have to vote for Trump, even if you live in California, and it won't matter. You know that Trump is not going to win here. Republicans only make up 1/3 of the electorate. Actually, they make up slightly less than 1/3 of the electorate. So there's no possible way Trump will win California. Having said that, what you can do is have your vote banked on the popular vote, so that he does show up as a popular vote.
It's a protest vote, essentially.
Right, because you look back at 2016, and Hillary Clinton touted, well, I won the popular vote. Well,
by 3 million votes or 4 million votes or whatever it was.
Yes, and the entirety of your popular vote lead came from California.
From California, right.
Because if you were to take California out of it, and you would have lost the popular vote as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so even in California, where it doesn't seem like it makes a difference, and you can go and vote a straight Libertarian ticket and, bask in the purity of your conscience, if people are going to attack our constitutional system for allowing people to win the presidency and not win the popular vote, all right, then I guess we have to bank popular vote ballots as well. So that, if it comes out that Trump wins both the popular vote and the Electoral College vote.
Yeah, we're talking like Reagan-esque type election.
Yeah, then it becomes almost impossible to attack the legitimacy of the system.
Right.
And so while I would normally vote Libertarian out here in California, I just don't feel that I could do that in this election. And as much as
Speaking of Libertarian, and I don't want to drag us off topic.
Please drag.
But you did you see the Waltz interview where he was asked about the Cheney endorsements of Harris, and he said, "Well, I think they'll bring in the Libertarian vote." And
tell me
Robbie
you know
Suave,
tell me you know nothing about Libertarians without telling me you know nothing about Libertarians.
Robbie Suave was like, "Idiot, we've hated the Cheneys forever. We've never liked them. They're not bringing any Libertarian votes in.
Yeah,
maybe lefty Libertarians, but they're not real Libertarians anyway." But,
that betrays such an ignorance of what the Libertarian movement is all about.
Well, Libertarians have their own selves to thank for that, because they have totally screwed the pooch explaining the philosophy over the past 25, 30 years. Well,
they turned it over to the ANCAPs, the anarcho-capitalists.
Well, the ANCAPs, and then the anti-war crowd. And then that led to the vegan crowd. And then I just want to smoke pot, man.
Yeah.
Like, there's a bit more to the philosophy than that. Well, I mean, that's the whole reason that you and John and Bruce like started the whole neo-libertarian thing was like, can we get back to basic principles here? There's actually a philosophy here that makes sense
And
if you follow it.
and that's compatible with our Constitution.
Right. It has historical accuracy, known results. It follows basic facts, and it's an actual durable philosophy that fits with the idea that human beings are not perfect. We're going to screw up. We're going to be failures and corrupt, but we can still have a government that works for us. And we may blow it up, but it's not going to be that big a deal because it's not that important to us in our everyday lives.
Yeah, but in the 1980s, after 1980, so throughout the 80s and 90s, the anarcho-capitalists just took over the Libertarian Party, and it really became way more of a fringe movement than it should have been. But
True.
yeah, that is what it is.
But anyway, it was just an aside. I saw that out there, and I just laughed my ass off when I saw Waltz, thinking,
well, here's another.
You think the Cheneys are going to pull in libertarians?
Here's another aside. You know, there's a very good argument to be made that the existence of Trump and the political environment around him, and I don't attribute this all directly to Trump. In fact, I attribute it more to the fact that we have a political system that is not currently set up in such a way as to serve the interests of the electorate, but to serve the interests of the donor class and politicians and the media class.
A patrician system, yeah.
Yeah, we've sort of created a patrician system. And Donald Trump is in many ways a reaction to that system. But what has been interesting is that as part of that reaction is looking at how deranged it has made both pro-Trump and anti-Trump people. So people who I used to have a lot of respect for and who I used to listen to quite a lot, like Jonah Goldberg from the National Review, who now runs a thing called The Dispatch. And you can look
wrote a great book about fascism.
Yes, which, by the way, as of this last week, he has partially repudiated.
Of course he has.
But again, it's part of this. He's one of the people who got deranged by Trump. You know, his famous tweet from 2020 about the Biden laptop. You actually believe the Hunter Biden laptop story, like at face value? Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I actually do, because the facts do tend to indicate it. The fact that you are questioning it tells me that you're coming from a less than rational position. Right. And so you've got these people who are conservatives, but who Trump has just basically run out of the GOP, and who just
they're of the political class,
and who just cannot accept that anything that Trump does may be legitimate. And they by the way, because I was listening to Jonah Goldberg just today, and he is fully on board with this Trump is a fascist, and he used his book, Liberal Fascism, as an example of Trump having fascist ideas, which he's not entirely wrong. I mean, some of the things that Trump says philosophically are part of the fascist philosophy, although I wouldn't declare them as fascist in and of themselves. They just tend to come from an older, sort of pre-modern political tradition of the government, the nation as a family. The nation is not a family. So it's more like the monarchical tradition.
I mean, that's certainly nationalist
of the government.
Yeah, but it's monarchical. Yeah, that's probably a better word, monarchical. Yeah.
But then on the other side, you've got the Tucker Carlsons. And our talk about the Libertarian Party just brought this up. Tucker Carlson was at, what was it, that TPUSA thing with Charlie Kirk?
Yeah.
And he was talking about how Donald Trump was, is going to be like daddy, and daddy is going to come home and you've been a naughty little girl and you're going to get a spanking, which, by the way, super creepy. Also, by the way, wasn't he like a fellow at the Cato Institute, the leading libertarian think tank in this country, for 20 years?
Was he?
Yeah.
Was Tucker Carlson?
Yes.
He was with the Heritage Foundation, I thought.
No, he was with Cato for like 20 years.
He was with Cato? I didn't know he was with Cato.
Yeah. So, I mean, so again, now we're talking about a pro-Trump.
He's gotten very strange in the last
a pro-Trump guy
5 or 6 years
who seems like he has been deranged as well and has completely moved away from, I mean, at least when Jonah Goldberg talks about liberal fascism, and he says the big mistake he made in that book was assuming that he was part of a conservative movement that held as bedrock principles the inviolability of the Constitution and, certain, free market economics and all the other stuff. And it turns out that was really only skin deep. And as soon as Trump showed up, it all went away. I have a problem with his analysis of that as well. Because I think what we're seeing is a reaction to a conservatism that held all of these deeply held beliefs and did absolutely nothing to defend them for 30 years.
That's how you got Trump. That's exactly how you got Trump.
And that's how you get Trump.
That's how you got the Tea Party. That's how you got Trump.
So what you had was a conservative movement that spoke a good game about all of these things, but didn't actually believe
Didn't do anything.
And they didn't do anything to protect them against the Marxist worldview that's taken over the Democratic Party. And it's just been interesting to watch people who 10 years ago I would have listened to and pretty much accepted anything that they said relatively uncritically, because I would have assumed that they were well thought out, well reasoned. And I would include both Jonah Goldberg and Tucker Carlson, who at this point are now on opposite ends of sort of the Trump derangement syndrome spectrum. And I would have, I was perfectly willing to listen. Drudge is another one. It has been instructive to watch
Charles Johnson. Remember Charles Johnson, Little Green Footballs?
Yeah. Yeah, it's
no, he had always kind of come from the left side anyway.
That's true, but
he was honest, at least back 2000. When was that? 2004. I mean, he saw mendacity and went after it. That was great. And then people like Glenn Greenwald, who I still can't fucking stand. I think he's such a liar, but he's more on the ball now than almost anybody I would have listened to back in the early 2000s.
It really irks me that I find so much to disagree with Jonah Goldberg and Tucker Carlson, both of whom I used to respect highly. And then someone like Glenn Greenwald, who
of all people
I used to not respect at all. And to live in a world where whatever Jonah Goldberg on the anti-Trump side says and whatever Tucker Carlson on the strongly pro-Trump side says, I find them difficult to believe. And Glenn Greenwald seems to be saying all the right things. I live in this topsy-turvy world. And both of these people all of these people will tell you, well, I haven't changed at all.
Right. Yeah. No, they all changed around me.
No. I'm the one who hasn't changed.
Right.
I'm the one who still believes all the things that I used to believe. But I also recognize that I don't live in the same world that we lived in 10, 20 years ago. And
I would give that to Glenn Greenwald a little bit more than the others because he's always been a lefty-leaning, civil libertarianish type of person. And I didn't have a problem with his views. I mean, I had arguments with him as much as his methods of promoting his views. He was just very dishonest and
sock
cagey.
puppetry.
Sock off, yeah, Mona. Yeah, I mean, it was just so dumb and unnecessary. But then there were people like Radley Balko. He and I have a lot of agreements on some basic things. We're both big believers in the Constitution whatsoever, but we've always disagreed on a lot of other stuff. But we were always able to get along. Even when we argued, we were able to argue, intellectually without casting aspersions on each other. Um, he's stayed the same. He's still the same guy, right? I mean, he hasn't changed or backed anybody because, well, now I believe that this is the right way to go forward. He's very consistent intellectually, and I respect that. I have a lot of respect for that because he thought his way into his position. I love that saying you always say: you can't argue somebody out of intellectual position they didn't argue themselves into. And it's just very true. And that's what I see with people like Jonah Goldberg and Tucker Carlson is they almost have an emotional bent to their arguments nowadays.
Yeah, I think one of the things that
I don't like that.
I think one of the things that makes Trump so interesting is that he has, and I hate to call it what I'm about to call it, but he has exposed the psychological weaknesses of some of the people who both hate him and some of the people who support him. And,
I don't know why you hate to say that. I think that's fairly accurate.
My relationship with Trump has always been transactional.
Yeah.
And I think both of us have criticized Trump pretty viciously where he deserved to be criticized. And we have praised him on those things where he deserved to be praised.
Just like every other president we've ever had.
Yeah. So I just don't have, well, personally, I dislike Trump as a person. I've never really invested that amount of my own self-image into Donald Trump, and I think that's the problem. Donald Trump wrecks some people's self-image, and I don't know why. I just see that as what I've hesitated to call it, but it seems like a psychological weakness. And I wonder how much
but
of
that's
it,
what he's good at exposing. I mean, that's literally his superpower, right? I mean, that's why he's such a master troll. He knows how to get into the fibers of your psyche and, split it apart. I mean, and he's fucking hilarious. I mean, he is fucking hilarious.
Yeah, look, there's two things. Number one, from Chad, Inebriated Plutarch says the current Libertarian Party candidate doesn't even seem to be a small L libertarian, which is true.
I don't even know who it is.
The other thing is the left's complete inability to recognize humor. One of the interesting things that Trump did.
That's not funny.
Yeah, one of the interesting things that Trump did, he was talking to Joe Rogan, and they were talking about these offshore wind farms, which, by the way, are just killing right whales. They just are.
And birds.
And by the way, they have permits to kill a certain number of right whales.
That's right.
And Donald Trump started talking about these wind farms and they're killing the whales. And he said something on the order of, I think I'd like to be a whale psychologist. Which is funny. I mean, it's sort of darkly funny, but it's funny. And first thing I see on Twitter is, this is how crazy Trump is. Now he says he wants to be a whale psychologist. Dude.
It's not funny.
Well, it's not that it's not funny. I mean, we can always make the criticism that your joke wasn't funny. It is that they don't recognize it as a joke.
But you know the meme I'm talking about.
Yeah, I know the meme you're talking about. But the thing is that they don't recognize that he's trying to be funny. They don't recognize that he's making a joke.
No, they don't recognize humor at all because they first seek to be offended. I have never seen so many people who are eager to be offended. Like, no benefit of the doubt, nothing. I need to be offended. And, that'll raise my social credit score, I guess. I don't know what they're thinking.
Look, it's directly tied to their need to feel morally superior.
I think so, because, look, you know how it is with guys. We regularly offend our best friends. Matter of fact, the people we offend the most are the people who are closest to us, right? I could say things to you that I would never say to a stranger. At least, no, that's true. I would never say to a stranger. It's there's a certain comfortability that comes with knowing that you can give somebody shit, that you won't get under their skin. They'll take it and they'll give it back to you, and maybe even better, which is kind of what you're hoping when you're delivering the line, right?
Yeah, but Trump gets none of that benefit of the doubt for his every joke that he tells gets treated like it's serious. It's really weird. I did want to talk to you about one more thing, and we're now an hour and a half into this, so we got to wrap it up pretty quick. But what do you think about this idea from Trump's? It's a batshit crazy idea that we could just switch over to tariffs and do away with the income tax. And he always uses this story about how in 1896, the federal government was making up so much money they had to have a blue ribbon commission to figure out how to spend it. Yeah, because the federal government spent less than 2% of GDP.
And we also had two of the major cash crops in the world in tobacco and cotton. So we were kind of ahead of the game there.
Yeah, the federal government didn't do anything. They didn't spend any money.
And I think that's more important. What you said right there is that the federal government was like 100th, 1,000th of the size that it is now.
Right now, the federal government spends 38.9% of GDP every year. $6.6 trillion.
That's just crazy. And we've talked about this before about how, what's the sustainability level of your GDP being so supported by government spending?
Yeah.
It's the higher it goes, the worse it gets. And we know that.
You're not going to spend $6.6 trillion in tariffs, my friend. I'll tell you that right now.
And you're not going to bring in, especially the kind of tariffs he's talking about. I understand his idea of the tariffs, and there is a certain sense to it that, hey, look, if you're going to make it over there and then try to sell it here, well, then we're going to charge you, this tariff. But if you make it here, then you won't have to pay the tariff. Of course, what nobody says, because the Democrats are too fucking stupid to bring up this point, but well, that just means that if it's a 20% tariff, well, guess what all the local manufacturers are going to do? They're going to go up to like 18 or 19%, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it doesn't. He has recently, though, it seems to me, started talking about the fair tax, which.
And that's interesting. Look, federal sales tax, a VAT.
It can't be workable. It can't be a sales tax. Sales taxes.
It'd be a production tax.
Sales tax is just too easy to avoid. The only way that you can do it is on a consumption level is a VAT. That's really the only thing that works. But
you have to get rid of the income tax.
Yes.
Then.
Yeah,
you can't have the income tax.
I mean, philosophically, I am opposed to the income tax for any number of reasons. The most important of which is it's none of the government's damn business how much money I make. And my private.
So now we're down for, all right, we're repealing the 16th, 17th, possibly the 19th. Just throwing it out there.
Just throwing it out there. Yeah, well, definitely the 16th and the 17th. We really do. The income tax is so corrosive. Because it puts people under the direct thumb of the federal government. Plus, it requires that you share with them financial information that you wouldn't even share with your own family, for goodness sakes. But you have to
And they get that money before you even get your paycheck.
Yeah. So income tax is
fucking bastards.
Is a non-starter for me. It was the worst idea
I got money back
ever.
From the federal government. No, you gave them a fucking interest-free loan.
Interest-free loan is what you did. And that's, of course, for people who do get money back. I haven't gotten money back from the federal government for many, many years. In fact, I end up owing.
We underpay all the time.
I end up owing at the end of every year. So if you have a 20% VAT and you don't go after individuals for income, I think you would actually get a lot more revenue than you would off the income tax.
Yeah, because it's being taxed at the manufacturing level. So
it's being taxed.
They're just paying it, then they pass it on.
It's being taxed at every value added level, and it's just included.
Well, that's true. Yeah, that's true. Right.
And so, sure, at the end of the day, prices would be more expensive, but would they be more expensive than what you're paying in income tax? Probably not. And the amount of revenue
and you can control your spending.
Yeah, and you just choose not to buy a thing. There's a lot of discretionary spending that I do that I just wouldn't do if there was a VAT on things. It would make me think twice about buying some stuff. And of course, that means that I would be more likely to save that money, and there would be more savings available for investment. So the tariff thing, I think, is just dumb, because there's no way that you could do it, and it wouldn't give you the amount of money that you needed. And by the way, companies would just stop importing, and then we'd have to try to build stuff here. I don't know what your
discretionary spending.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, that would be a lot more expensive guitar, my friend. So, but I do like the idea. I don't like the fair tax itself because it is a sales tax. Sales taxes are too easy to avoid.
Yes,
but
right.
We really.
But there's something workable with it.
Yeah, we really.
But it's got to be paired with getting rid of the income tax.
Yeah, we really should be having a discussion of replacing the income tax with some sort of consumption tax, which I think would almost have to be a VAT. I think that'd be the only thing.
All right, so you're saying we got to put together a white paper and send it to the Trump administration?
Yeah, well, I'm not sure that they would listen to us, but certainly somebody needs to send something.
Why wouldn't they? We're fucking popular, man.
Oh,
people love us.
Yeah,
especially when we talk about economics.
Yeah, well, that's why I held it off to the very, very end, so that we wouldn't be talking about it for an hour. Having said that, it is the very, very end. Michael, as always, it's a pleasure. We'll talk to you next time.
All right, buddy. Love you. See you later.
See you later, buddy. Love you. All right, you've been watching the Observations podcast, or if you're listening to the audio version, I guess you haven't been watching it, you've been listening to it. But in any event, you've been participating in hearing and seeing, for some of you, the Observations podcast. I am just talking myself into a hole here. Thanks for watching or listening or whatever it is that you're doing. We'll talk to you next time. So long.